In this video, I want to break down some of the things I'm doing in my house and also differentiate between a budget house and a cheap house. In my opinion, those two are not synonymous, especially when it comes to this particular build. So I think a lot of people think that when you are doing, any sort of building or remodeling, that if you don't spend a ton of money, you're going to get cheap stuff that's not going to last. Hi, Pachi. Yes, this is my dog, Pachi, who's putting her paw on me because reasons. And when it comes, there are certain things where price does make a very big difference. Obviously, the difference between a, you know, $1,000 budget fridge versus a $10,000 Sub-Zero is extreme. Um, But when you get away from the extremes, you have not as much variation in quality as long as you're doing things smartly. And so part of the reason why I did decide to go the semi DIY way is so that I could get things that were on the higher end of the spectrum as far as quality and reliability, but not have to pay a lot of money that I couldn't afford. So it was a matter of making choices in a way that would allow me to get the things that I want and also the things that will, set me up for a lot of success later on, but still be again able to afford them because that is kind of the whole theme of this project is how do I get what I want but still be able to pay for it. Um, and so far, the numbers show that I have made a lot of really good decisions for in order to get any sort of funding on this product. I know life's hard. In order to get the funding for this project, I had to submit the plans and the specs and the kind of the finishes that I was planning on doing to an appraiser so that they could appraise the finished product. And, of course, everything is provisional. The house isn't built yet, so they were kind of relying on what I provided them, but without me lifting, without doing anything, without even before we closed on the land. Well, I should say technically after we closed on the land, but before any work was done, before we even applied for the permits, I have somewhere in the realm of eighty to $100,000 in equity in this house, just based on the rough budget estimates that we've given to the bank of how much money we're going to need and the appraised value of the house. So I was able to get that much equity because I made some choices that upfront will cost me more money. Good Lord. And will probably be a little bit more of a pain just to get started, but in the long run will basically pay for themselves. So the first, I would say, you know, pound wise, penny foolish. I guess I'm not sure how to flip that particular idiom. Was going with the SIPs in the first place. It is more expensive to build with a SIP house than it is with a conventional stick-built house, which is, kind of how everybody's used to, where you have the framing and you kind of have the little um, rows of 2x4s going down being the skeleton of the house, and then you frame it in with the plywood or OSB, and then you have the insulation, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the way that everybody thinks when they think of building a house. And the SIP panels are slightly more expensive. It's kind of hard to get an exact estimate, mainly because, it's hard to get a lot of really good estimates about exactly how much it is to build any particular house in the first place because it's so variable. But I would estimate that just from that alone, I am probably spending close to 20% extra than I would be with just a stick house. So I know off the bat that I'm already spending that much extra money, but the thing that's going to be going for me in the long run is I'm going to have a much lower utility cost, basically starting from the beginning. So the reason that the SIPs are so efficient is because there's no points where there's an easy transfer of energy. So basically, because you have just the continuous line of insulation that's not broken up by the 2x4s in the outside wall, that allows for much less heat transfer between the outside of the house and the inside of the house. And that, of course, is important no matter what season it is. If it's winter, I want to keep the heat inside. If it's summer, I want to keep the heat outside. And so basically saying that, so having the SIP panels where it doesn't allow for that energy transfer is going to lower my utility bills in the long run. So again, I'm spending more money now and using that extra to say I'm lowering my costs in the future, especially when it comes to things like, electricity and natural gas, which are very variable cost. Just anecdotally, the price of gas and electricity over last year has gone up by about 2.5, like 2.5 times. People are paying what they were paying from last year. So having a house that's very energy efficient is going to be saving me a lot of money in the long run because, again, there's not going to be that heat transfer. So whatever I need the house to do, it's going to take a lot less energy to get it there and then maintain it. The next, I guess I am just going to go with the phrase pound wise, penny foolish upgrade that I did is I'm having a metal roof. That is something that I more than one person encouraged me to like try to not do simply because the upfront cost is more expensive for a metal roof, and that is very true. However, in my case, because I'm doing a small house that has a very simple roof structure, it's actually not a lot more expensive than it would be to get an asphalt shingle roof. So probably between material and labor, depending on how it kind of ends up shaking out, I will be paying somewhere in the realm of $16,000 to $20,000 for the metal roof. Again, that's expensive. That's not a cheap, that's not a cheap option by any means. But when I did the math for as far as an asphalt roof would cost, it would cost me somewhere in the realm of I think like $12,000 to $16,000. So again, it's not I'm paying more now. But the real selling point is that instead of having a asphalt or cedar roof that's going to have a warranty of like, and a life expectancy of like 20 to 30 years, the metal roof life expectancy is 50, 50. So I'm spending that extra like, anywhere between five and $10,000 now, but that means that I basically might never have to replace the roof as long as I live in this house. And if I do end up having to sell it, which is definitely not the plan, after all I've gone through to get this house, I basically never plan to leave voluntarily. That's significant. That's something I don't have to worry about. That is something that is like just peace of mind. Um, that is really helpful for me because again, it's solid, it's there. I was able to choose what color I wanted, which is, nice perk. And it's something that will basically last a hefty amount of the life of the house, if not almost the entire life expectancy of this house. So then, in addition to the metal roof, kind of the other thing that like I've made the decision for that has kind of taken a lot of people aback is my decision to have the entire heating system be radiant in-floor heat. So this is where there's the tubes underneath the flooring. In my case, there's going to be tubes inset in the cement in the basement. So that's kind of the classic where you have the tube set in some sort of a padding system, and then the concrete for the basement is poured on top of them. So they're just encased in there. And then I'm also going to have in-floor heating for the main floor, which is going to be basically in the ceiling between the basement and the main floor. And that was another thing that a lot of people kind of did not, they were very skeptical of my choice to do that. And I even had some people try to convince me that that would not be legally allowed where I am in Minnesota, that I could not do that. And so luckily I was able to find um, the contact information for people who actually write the building codes, the residential building codes in the state of Minnesota. And I was saying, hey, I want to do this. This is how I want to do things. Is this something I can do? And they said, yeah, you can do it. Um, but the thing that usually makes people shy away from doing this is that code requires ventilation. And that is not standard with in-floor heat. With most people around here choose to go with a forced air furnace, which, is kind of the big thing in the basement, the big kind of metal box in the basement that has all the different vents going in and out of it and makes depending on how old it is, it may make a lot of noise, may not make any noise, but it's kind of where it just like pushes hot air through the vents into the rest of the house. And that is what people choose to go through because it kind of solves both problems at once. You get your heating and you get your ventilation because they are required to have air intake from the outside of the house. So how I've been able to solve that particular problem is I am having energy recovery vents, ductless energy recovery vents, placed in each of the bedroom walls. Well, the two bedrooms and the office. Technically, the office is legally considered a bedroom, but no one's ever going to use it as a bedroom. I plan on never using it as a bedroom. And the living room, and then the oven slash stove exhaust, that is also considered a point of ventilation, according to the state. So that's how I'm basically able to solve that. And then also, that is going to allow me to have much fresher air than most people have in the winter because again, when you have to go through the furnace, there's a lot that happens to that air as it's being heated up. And so sometimes it gets very dry. A lot of houses in this area are very dry during the winter, so a lot of people will have humidifiers. I don't know if I'm going to need a humidifier. I might, just because the outside air is also very dry. So, um, it might just be that I end up having to have humidifiers just for comfort, but at the very least, it's not going to be actively being dried by the heating system. And that is also contributing to the environmental efficiency of the house because even with a non-STIP house, even with this conventional stick-built house, hidden floor heating is considered to be very efficient because again, instead of having to constantly pump the hot air into the house, it just heats up the air. And so it's basically like you're kind of almost running a stove underneath your house, sort of. It's kind of hard to explain exactly how it works. And I'm going with a very unique in-floor heat system where instead of stapling the pipes to the subfloor, I am having a special one that where tubes will run kind of, they'll be hanging a little bit below the subfloor, and then there'll be insulation a little bit below those, and so they basically will be creating a heat pocket, which is even more efficient. It's basically like my house is going to be wearing like kind of a wetsuit, and combine that with the SIPs, again, it's a wetsuit for a house basically. And so that's also going to allow it to be very efficient, which again, I like. I like having a house. I like, not having to, pay a lot of money for heating and cooling. I also don't, I also would be really nice to have a house that's just very comfortable and doesn't have to work to stay comfortable year round. So in doing the in-floor heat, then the next question is how are you going to cool it? Minnesota is unfortunately not a place where you can have, I think probably in the past you could get away without having air conditioning. That is very much not the case right now. So I did need to have a way to cool it. And so the way I decided to do that is ductless mini splits. Ductless mini splits are, it's kind of, they're really hard to describe. It's kind of, it's a weird, it's a weird little machine, but basically there's a wall unit and an outside compressor unit, and it acts as kind of a heat pump, either way. And I do, I am going to be getting some, they're going to be energy efficient mini splits, but because I'm doing the in-floor heat, I don't have to do the extreme heat. So there's different brands. I think there's LG, like the different brands have different names. LG Red, Hyperheat for Olympus, the ones where it's basically they're designed to keep working when it's really cold. And most of the regular ones are not designed to continue working when it gets below a certain temperature. I think usually it's somewhere around like 15 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which, that's a warm day sometimes in Minnesota winter. It gets into the single digits and we're like, yay, I guess. So the mini splits are going to be the primary cooling thing in the summer. And then also it is going to do, because they're not going to be hyperheat, I can't really use them in the winter, but when we're having kind of the transitions where sometimes it's like really, really hot one day and then really, really cold the next, or we kind of have these like strange weather fluctuations, they will still have the capacity to put out heat for a short amount of time, but they definitely will not be the primary way the house is heated, especially in the winter. Then kind of the last like more environmental upgrade that I'm doing, and this is kind of really going to depend um, on kind of some various factors, although it's kind of seeming more and more like it's going to be able to happen. I wasn't sure, is we're going to try to put solar panels on the roof. And because the house faces east west, being able to put it on the west side, that's really optimal, like ideal for solar panel, because like the afternoon sun is usually stronger than the morning sun. So having the panels on the west side of the house is going to help them generate more energy. And again, just it makes it so I don't have to worry as much about fluctuating energy costs. Especially because, the only thing that's going to be running on any sort of gas, initially at least, is going to be the boiler for the in-floor heat. Um, that was something I tried to see if I could do an electric version, and it wasn't viable. Either, to have the power that I needed was going to be extremely expensive, or I was going to have to double up. Have like basically two heaters in line with each other, and kind of, one heats up the cold water to about what it can, and then the next one takes the already kind of heated water and gets it to where it actually needs to be. And that was also very expensive. And those are not as readily available as I want them to be. So because we're kind of working on a budget and on a timetable, I do have to have natural gas for the boiler, and hopefully I'll be able to get whatever use I need out of that, and then convert to an electric boiler in the future. But at this point, we'll just kind of see. But basically, kind of going back to the solar panels, the rest of the house is going to be electric. All my appliances are going to be electric. Obviously, going to have all kinds of other stuff that's going to need to be run, and so um, having electric panels, the solar panels, is going to allow me to basically not be off grid entirely, but to be kind of um, grid apathetic. Like, okay, we'll see what the grid's doing, but I do have my own way of, making sure that my costs stay consistent, and that also I'm not, hopefully at least trying to greatly reduce any energy dependence that I have on things like fossil fuels. Another thing, once the house is completed, I am, hoping to be able to buy an electric car. My current car, I love her very much. She's a very good car, but she is 12 years old and has nearly 275,000 miles on her. So, um, as much as, she's been a great little car and she's gotten me through a lot of stuff, I don't know how much more time she has left in her. So I do really want my next car to be an electric car. And so kind of from the beginning, I've been like, there needs to be a car charger in the garage. So that's already done and dusted, put in the plans. And again, going back to saving money, that is a lot cheaper than putting in a car charger in an already existing garage. When I was looking at starting, kind of renovating a house or anything like that, the quotes that I got as far as putting in an electric car charger, or not even quotes, just kind of ballpark, was anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 kind of ish, heavy on the ish for all of them because they were just like, well, based on your description, here's about. But the cost to put in the electric car charger right now, they told us $600. So again, this is not in terms of the amount of money I'm spending, it's not a lot as far as saving, but it is saving some money. And it's also going to allow it to be set up, you know, right from the get-go. So there's no having to kind of rewire anything. It's just going to be wired perfectly and ready to go. So even if we look at stuff that it really doesn't have any environmental impact much at all, me doing my own work is allowing me to do a lot of stuff that I just basically could not afford. Since I'm doing the tiling, I can have tiled shower walls with the inset shelf. That's something that I don't know if I could afford if I was paying for someone else to tile for me. I'm, able to do kind of some nicer flooring, like kind of a higher grade, like laminate or engineered hardwood, because again, I'm doing it myself. I'm just paying for, the products. I'm not paying for labor. And, I could, right now the plan is to do quartz countertops. We'll see if that ends up happening. That's kind of one of the things where I'm like, this is what I want to do. But, if the budget requires it, I will do something like butcher block. But I do have access to, some very nice materials as far as that's concerned. And also, my dad, who's going to be helping me out with a lot of stuff on this house, has access to basically every kind of stain and sealant that exists kind of in North America. So, whatever we decide to do, if it ends up being butcher block, it'll be the nicest butcher block that probably could go in a house and will be durable to the point where you could like light a fire on it and it would be fine. Um, so again, those are things that I, in my mind, make it a budget house and not a cheap house. So the house itself will still be very well designed, well planned. It'll feel like very luxurious and very comfortable, but without breaking the bank. When I was trying to find like kind of argument, kind of convincing the bank about why they should lend me this money, I pointed out that like, I'm doing things that even literal like $1 million houses don't have. Some of the most expensive houses on the market, where they're selling for, seven figures, they either don't have or it's a very localized. They may have in-floor heat, but only in the bathrooms, not the whole house. Or they don't have a metal roof. They still have shingles. Um, or, maybe they are like green tested, they're supposed to be more environmentally friendly, but they're not to the extent that a SIP panel house is. So that's why, again, kind of going back to the thing that I opened the video with, is that before I did anything, I had $90,000, give or take, in equity for this project. And I'm hoping that because, when we, budgeted everything out between myself and my contractor, we budgeted out on the high end. So hopefully, we don't hit the high numbers when it comes to the things that we are doing, or, giving ourselves that cushion is enough to absorb any unexpected expenses. But even without that, I still, on paper, have a much more valuable house than it's going to cost me to build it. And that is something that I could not have had if I had just renovated. I mean, maybe I could have, but not nearly to this extent. I think when I looked at renovating, I could maybe give myself like $20,000 to $30,000 of equity. As far as where we are right now with the building process, we're still waiting for the actual excavation to start. The excavator determined that he was going to need to use a bigger machine than he had initially planned on. because there are some larger stumps in the ground. And he also needed to kind of study the plans a little bit more to determine where exactly he was going to dig and kind of start, getting everything. So it kind of sounds like he thinks he has everything he needs, and he's pretty confident that he'll be able to at least start the process sometime in the next few days. So hoping that's the case. Because kind of once we get that going, then everything else can either start going or at least be scheduled. So, I kind of wish I had more of an exciting update as far as the actual process, but we're not there quite yet. We're getting there, and hopefully we'll be rocking and rolling fairly soon. So I'll keep kind of going with updates and kind of doing more history type stuff until we get to um, the part that I do things, and I'll kind of hopefully be able to give more updates on the actual building process in future videos.